Right after our wedding, my husband's family handed me a bill for every expense they'd ever paid for him. His mother smirked, "Pay up, or give up your inheritance." My husband just stood there, silent. I took the bill, smiled, and said, "I have a better idea." The next week, they were served with a notice that left them begging. I should have seen the signs. I really should have. Looking back, there were so many little things that should have warned me what kind of people my in-laws were. The weird control over my husband, Nathan. The constant passive-aggressive comments about money. The way his mom, Denise, always managed to insert herself into every aspect of our relationship. But I ignored it. Love makes you ignore things. Nathan and I had been together for 5 years before we got married. I knew his family was wealthy. Not we fly private jets wealthy, but old Southern real estate money wealthy. Land, properties, trust funds, the kind of wealth that isn't flashy but runs deep. I grew up middle class. My parents worked hard, saved what they could, and made sure I had everything I needed. I put myself through college, got a solid job in financial litigation, and built a good life for myself. When Nathan and I got engaged, his parents insisted on paying for the wedding. And I mean insisted. Denise made a big deal about it. "It's our gift to you both," she had said. "You're part of the family now." I pushed back. I didn't want them paying. I even argued with Nathan about it, but he kept saying, "This is just how they are. They're traditional. They want to do this." Fine. Whatever. It wasn't about money for me. I made good money. I had an inheritance from my late grandfather that I planned to use for our future. I didn't need their money. I should have trusted my gut. The wedding itself was beautiful. A historic venue in Charleston, South Carolina. Flowers everywhere. A jazz band. A perfect night. For a moment, I thought, maybe I was wrong about them. Then, right after the reception, when most of the guests had left, Denise walked over to me with a thick envelope. She had that smug look she always got when she thought she was in control. "This is for you, dear," she said, all fake sweetness. I opened it. Inside was a detailed, itemized bill for every single expense they had ever spent on Nathan. Not just the wedding. His entire life. It listed hospital bills from when he was born, school tuition, clothes, vacations, birthday parties, even groceries from when he was a kid. The total? $365,789.42. I swear, I thought it was a joke. I looked up at Denise, expecting her to laugh. She didn't. She was dead serious. Nathan's dad, Robert, stepped up next to her. "We think it's only fair," he said in a businesslike tone. "Since you're his wife now, these expenses fall to you." I actually laughed. I thought, there is no way this is real. No one does this. Then Denise dropped the bomb. "If you can't pay," she said, tilting her head, "we'll have to reevaluate Nathan's place in the family inheritance." I glanced at Nathan, waiting for him to explode. To say something. Anything. But he just stood there. Silent. That's when I knew. He knew about this. He knew and did nothing. I felt my stomach drop. Denise smirked, like she had already won. Like she expected me to panic, to beg for mercy, to give in. I took a deep breath. Smiled. And said, "I have a better idea." Denise frowned. "Excuse me?" I folded the bill neatly, tucked it back in the envelope, and said, "I'll get back to you." Then I walked away. Nathan and I did not have a wedding night. The second we got back to our suite, I told him, "I need to know if you were part of this." He looked guilty. "I didn't know they'd actually do it," he mumbled. "That's not an answer," I snapped. He sighed. "They told me a few weeks ago. They said it was just a formality. They weren't really going to make you pay. It's just a way of showing commitment." I stared at him. "You let them ambush me. On our wedding night. They're just old-fashioned," he said, like that made it okay. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I got to work. Because if Denise wanted to play financial hardball, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The next morning, I woke up before Nathan and got to work. If Denise and Robert wanted to turn my marriage into a transaction, I was going to show them just how expensive their little game could get. First, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I knew their money came from real estate, generational wealth passed down, mostly in the form of properties in South Carolina. But I also knew old money families like theirs often had loopholes, tax evasion, and financial skeletons buried under decades of bad business practices. So while Nathan was still asleep, I dug in. I pulled every email, text, and document I had from the wedding planning. Anything that proved that their gift wasn't a loan but a voluntary expense. And then I checked something else. Nathan's inheritance. Because if they were willing to dangle it over my head like a prize, I needed to know exactly how it worked. When Nathan woke up, I was already dressed. "We need to talk," I said. He sat up, rubbing his face. "Look, can we not do this now? We're doing this now." I threw the envelope onto the bed. "Explain this to me. Why do they think they can hold your inheritance over my head?" He sighed. "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it." He hesitated. Then he finally admitted the truth. His family controlled everything. His trust fund? They managed it. The properties he was set to inherit? They still technically owned them. Every dime he had ever received? Filtered through them first. "They have to approve everything," he muttered. "It's how they keep things secure." I stared at him. "You're telling me you don't actually own anything?" He shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. "I mean, technically, not yet. But when they pass." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Nathan had spent his whole life thinking he was rich when, in reality, he was just a puppet. And worse? He was okay with it. I stood up. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To fix your mess." I didn't go to work that day. I went straight to Denise and Robert's house. If they wanted to play financial games, I wanted to hear the rules from their own mouths. Denise opened the door, dressed like she was about to host some fancy charity luncheon. "Well, dear. I didn't expect to see you so soon." She led me into their massive sitting room, all white furniture, gold accents, the kind of place where you're afraid to touch anything. Robert sat in his chair, reading the newspaper like some 1950s movie villain. "So," Denise said, pouring herself tea. "Have you decided how you'll be paying us back?" I smiled. "I have some questions first." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh." I leaned forward. "How does Nathan's inheritance actually work?" She sipped her tea. "Well, dear, that's family business." I kept smiling. "I'm family now." Her lips tightened. "The estate has a structured trust. It's been in place for generations. We simply ensure that it remains within the family." I nodded. "And who owns the properties?" Robert folded his newspaper. "Legally? Us." Bingo. Denise's expression didn't change, but I could see the flicker of something in her eyes, realization. She knew I had just found her weak spot. I stood up. "All right, then." Denise blinked. "Excuse me? I'm not paying your bill." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not a choice, dear." "Oh, but it is." I grabbed my purse. "You see, I work in financial litigation. So I know a gift is a gift. And if you try to enforce this ridiculous dowry, it won't hold up in court." Robert scoffed. "Do you really want to get lawyers involved?" I smiled sweetly. "Absolutely." Denise's voice turned cold. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" "I don't think, Denise. I know." I walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, turning back. "Since you still own the properties, that means they're subject to financial review, right?" Silence. "I mean," I continued, "if, say, someone were to report some discrepancies in your rental income, the IRS would have to audit everything, wouldn't they?" Denise's smug smile vanished. Robert's grip tightened on his newspaper. I let that sink in. "Have a great day," I said, and walked out. That night, Nathan and I had another massive fight. "You went to my parents' house without telling me," he snapped. "You let them ambush me at our wedding. I'd say we're even." "You don't understand." "No, Nathan, I do understand. I understand that you're a grown man who still lets his parents control his entire life." He looked away. I exhaled. "Nathan, I love you. But I will not be controlled." "I'm not asking you to be controlled." I gestured at the envelope sitting on the dresser. "Aren't you?" He didn't answer. I grabbed my laptop and got to work. Because if they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But they had no idea what I was about to do next. Nathan didn't come to bed that night. I heard him pacing in the living room for hours. Occasionally, I'd hear his phone buzz, and I knew exactly who it was, Denise and Robert, panicking. Good. Because they should panic. While he paced, I sat in bed, typing away on my laptop. I wasn't just looking at their financials, I was looking at Nathan's. I had never gone through his finances before. We kept our money separate, something I insisted on when we got engaged. But now, I needed to see exactly how deep his parents' control went. And what I found. It was worse than I thought. Nathan owed his parents over $100,000. Not in loans. Not in credit cards. But in reimbursed expenses, things they had paid for on his behalf, then forced him to pay back in installments. His college tuition? They had told him it was covered. But then, after he graduated, they made him sign a contract stating that he'd pay them back over time, with interest. His car? It wasn't a gift. They leased it in their name and made him pay them monthly. Even his childhood medical bills, they had somehow twisted those into his personal debt. It was insane. They had been draining money from him for years, making him think he was financially stable when in reality, they had been keeping him trapped. And the worst part? Nathan never told me. I dug deeper. The inheritance they kept threatening to take away? It didn't actually exist. At least, not in the way Nathan thought. He assumed there was some huge trust fund waiting for him, that he'd eventually take over the family properties and investments. But the legal documents told a different story. Denise and Robert had set it up so that Nathan would never actually own anything. The properties were in a trust that only they controlled. The money in the family estate could only be accessed if both of them approved it. And if they died? It didn't go to Nathan. It went to a charitable foundation, one they had set up themselves, meaning the money never actually left the family's hands. Nathan had been lied to his entire life. The next morning, Nathan finally spoke. "I don't understand why you're making this such a big deal," he said. I laughed. "Nathan, your parents have been bleeding you dry for years, and you're okay with it?" "They helped me out," he mumbled. "No, they didn't. They made you believe you were independent while keeping you financially trapped." Silence. Then he sighed. "What do you want me to do?" I stared at him. "You really have to ask?" He looked away. I knew then. Nathan wasn't going to fight this. Because fighting meant admitting they had control over him. And he wasn't ready to face that. So I made a decision. If he wasn't going to fight them, I would. And I wasn't playing fair. That day, I called a real estate attorney. One I had worked with before on a corporate case. I gave him the details of Nathan's so-called inheritance and asked a simple question: is there any way to legally transfer property ownership without their permission? His answer? Yes. Because Nathan was the legal heir, there were certain loopholes that would allow him to challenge the trust and transfer some of the properties into his name. And once they were in his name, I could legally separate our finances and move the assets into a marital trust, one that his parents couldn't touch. I wasn't just going to take their money. I was going to take their power. Twist number 4, Denise strikes back the next day. Nathan's phone blew up. Texts. Calls. Voicemails. At first, he ignored them. Then he finally picked up. I sat on the couch, watching as he spoke. At first, it was calm. Then his face went pale. "What do you mean?" he asked. A pause. "No, Mom, that's not fair." Another pause. "Wait. What?" He pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at me. "They're cutting me off." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "They're revoking my trust fund." I tilted my head. "The one you don't actually have?" He flinched. But then he sighed. "They also canceled my car lease." There it was. The real punishment. Denise and Robert had spent years pretending to be generous, but the second he stepped out of line, they yanked it all away. "I need to go talk to them," he said. I stood up. "No, you don't. I have to fix this." "Nathan," I said slowly, "there is nothing to fix. This was always going to happen. The second you stopped being useful to them, they were going to cut you off." His jaw clenched. "They're my family." I shook my head. "No, Nathan. They're your owners." Silence. Then he grabbed his jacket. And walked out. Nathan didn't come home that night. Or the next night. Then, on the third day, I got a message. From Denise. It was short. Nathan is staying with us for a while. He needs time to think. You should respect that. I stared at my phone. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my lawyer. And said 5 words. I want to protect myself. Because this wasn't just a marriage problem anymore. This was war. I stared at the text from Denise. Nathan is staying with us for a while. He needs time to think. You should respect that. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a statement of power. They were making it clear, Nathan belonged to them. And if I had any doubts before, they were gone now. I wasn't going to win him back. I wasn't going to convince him to fight for himself. Nathan had already chosen his side. So I stopped waiting. And I executed the plan I'd been building since the moment they handed me that bill. First, I met with my lawyer and finalized the property transfer. It took a lot of paperwork and some legal maneuvering, but I was able to move the newly inherited properties into my name. That meant Denise and Robert no longer had uncontested control over their assets. It also meant they would need my permission for anything involving those properties. Next, I officially cut financial ties with Nathan. I had been covering some of our shared bills, groceries, utilities, even some of his expenses when his parents forgot to send him money. Not anymore. I had my lawyer draft a financial separation agreement, locking down my assets so that neither Nathan nor his parents could touch a single cent. Then, for the final step. I waited. Denise threw a party. Of course, she did. It was some kind of charity event, held at one of their fancy country clubs, full of old money types, investors, family friends, and people who still thought marrying well was a woman's greatest achievement. I wasn't invited. But that didn't mean I wouldn't show up. I arrived unannounced, stepping into the room in a sleek black dress, walking straight through the sea of people who had no idea the entire family was about to implode. I spotted Nathan first. He was standing near the bar, talking to his father. He looked comfortable, like he had already forgotten everything that happened. Like he had just let them absorb him back into their world. Then I saw Denise. She was laughing, smiling, sipping champagne like she hadn't spent the last few weeks destroying her son's marriage. I didn't wait. I walked straight up to her and handed her an envelope. She barely glanced at it before smirking. Oh, dear. I hope this isn't a bill. I smiled. No, Denise. It's a cease and desist letter. The smile slipped. Excuse me? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You've been financially controlling Nathan for years. That stops today. I have documentation proving you've manipulated his inheritance, tied him to debt he never agreed to, and kept him financially dependent so he couldn't leave. You've used money as a weapon, and now, I'm using the law. She tried to laugh it off. That's ridiculous. It's not, I said, my voice even. And the IRS doesn't think so either. Her face paled. Because that's when she realized. I had reported them. Not just for financial coercion, but for tax fraud. I didn't have to dig far, there were plenty of shady transactions tied to the real estate properties they controlled. Properties that were now in my name. Which meant I had access to all the paper trails they thought were buried. And now? They were under investigation. Nathan must have heard the commotion, because suddenly, he was there. He looked between us, frowning. What's going on? Denise turned to him, grabbing his arm. She's trying to ruin us. Nathan looked at me. What did you do? I protected myself, I said simply. His eyes darted to the letter in Denise's hand, scanning the words. When he looked up again, there was something in his face I hadn't seen before. Panic. He knew I had one. They're my family, he said weakly, like that was supposed to mean something. They're your owners, I shot back. The room was dead silent now. People were watching. And then, in front of everyone, Denise made her final mistake. She turned to Nathan and snapped. You ungrateful little idiot. You let her do this? We gave you everything. We made sure you never had to struggle. And this is how you repay us? Her voice rose. You wouldn't survive a day without us. You're nothing without this family, and the second she leaves you, you'll come crawling back. You always do. There it was. The truth. Not just for me. But for Nathan. I saw it in his face. The realization. The humiliation. He had spent his whole life trying to prove himself to them, and the one time he stepped out of line, they turned on him instantly. I expected him to defend himself. To say something. But he didn't. He just stood there, his face pale, his whole body stiff, his hands shaking. Then? He walked out. And he didn't look back. The fallout was fast. Within weeks, Denise and Robert were fully under IRS investigation. Several of their properties, including the one they lived in, were seized. Nathan? He tried coming back. He called, left voicemails, even showed up at my office once. But I was done. I had spent too much time fighting for someone who didn't want to fight for himself. So I filed for divorce. Nathan didn't contest it. I don't think he had the energy to. The last time I heard about him, he was living in a small apartment, working a regular job for the first time in his life. His parents? They lost everything. And the best part? The rental apartment they moved into? I owned it. They never knew. But every single month, when they sent their rent check, they were paying me. It wasn't about money. It was about control. And I had taken all of it.